we presented what we refer to as data value-driven management. And what we are presenting is a way of stringing your data management knowledge area activities together and making sure they all align with something that's producing value for the business. And if I remember correctly, last time we spoke about the different types of use cases. We had revenue generation use cases, we had cost reduction use cases, and business process optimization use cases. Now, capability here. Now, what we're doing is we're actually going through and implementing the system for a ministry in Saudi Arabia. So it's actually test driving a lot of the work that we've been talking about and putting together. And these discussions each week sort of summarize pretty much what we've learned during the week and the week before. And so we're certainly happy to share implementation details, not any information that's confidential to the customer, of course, but just a journey on how we've been going about delivering and setting up the program within these ministries. Now, I did want to share with you guys a little bit of context of what's happening in Saudi Arabia. You may have heard some time back, but not sure. So basically, Veronica and I started in October, November last year, and we came out to do data management training. We trained almost 650 people, and when we got here, we realized that this was all part of the Saudi 2030 vision. And the Crown Prince has built a data strategy, a data and AI strategy to transform the economy from oil to data and AI. That's not to say that they're going to get rid of the oil or whatever it is, but I think there's some pressure around the world in terms of sustainability and all the different aspects around oil. So there's been this move and there's been this transformation. And it's phenomenal to interact with the people in Saudi, to interact with the youth in terms of how the opportunities that they're getting to drive data management. The demand for data management is phenomenal. We were talking to a vendor, a data management vendor the other day, and he was just saying how all this demand for work has exploded, the resources that are getting into different positions and having to do data management is quite something. So was there anybody who wasn't here last week that missed out on the essential concepts? Should I just go through it quickly? Is there anyone that would like me to go through the different aspects? Okay, Lebo Khan, is that your hands up? Would you like me to go through it?
Yes, please.
Okay, shall do. I think we did mention it earlier on. All right, so let's go through very quickly. If you'd like me to just slow down and stuff like that, I will. And basically what we are saying is that we've, for some time, in my experiences with the last 5 years, I've found varying levels of success of data management in big organizations. And when I get there and we do a maturity assessment and you see that they're very low, we find these very isolated pockets of data management. And then some form of compliance comes along and they have to quickly get everything in line. And compliance is a nice thing in a way because it actually creates a reason, and everyone then has to align up to this compliance, and so they get going. But without some really important driver like that, it seems to grow on its own. And even if we read the DNBOK, there's no one way of handling all of the different knowledge areas. So you could start at BI. A lot of people already have applications and databases, and now they want to start off with reporting, and then they start with the BI side. Or you may be doing some BI and some business notices, oh, shucks, the quality of these reports are really terrible. And then you start going back and you do some form of root cause analysis. And the next minute you're doing master data and metadata and data quality. And then you start to bring in those elements. So a lot of the times what I find is that the driver for establishing a capability is a weakness somewhere. It's got a problem. but we tend to do it haphazardly. And what I certainly believe, and what we've sort of worked on this past 2 months, is now finding a way of stringing everything together. And a lot of times when I'm in these difficult situations where we try to fix a problem, and then you ask, well, how are you delivering value to the business? All you can say is, well, I'm not really, but I am fixing your problems. And that's sometimes an awkward message to give to executives. It's a case of saying, well, are we benefiting? Is the business benefiting? Are we improving our business processes? Are we transforming the business? Are we creating revenue? And I'm saying, no, I'm just fixing your problems. So that's quite an awkward position to be in. So we've established what we call the principle of the path, and it's about making sure that all the work that you do is aligned in some form of fashion. And we believe that one of the ways that we can certainly grow our assets is improving the direction of the data asset, and then improving the direction of the data management of the data assets. There's two things we've got to pay attention to. And I think a lot of you know the Dickwood triangle from a data asset point of view, which basically is data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. We sort of know how to grow that. Really nice discussion with Peter Jackson and Carolyn Carruthers in terms of looking at your business value stream and then taking each value stream or understanding where your bottlenecks are, and then looking at the data that supports that value stream and then just improving it, going from data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And I think we actually showed that in some examples we gave of this transformation. Here's just the Dickwood triangle that we spoke about, and the growing in that value of that asset. And then we presented, and JG gave us an example of how this is used in the health industry with relationship to optimal care with risk management. And as you can see, as the data gets more and more valuable, both in every single area of this chain, and then as we go along from master data, any form of operations, health operations that were performed, to episodes of care, to case profiles. So this is an idea of a value chain, as well as the incremental updates for each area, each piece of data that we have. Then we also spoke a little bit about the data management direction, to say, well, how do we keep data management going? How do we set the direction? Now, I haven't seen this before. There's a little bit in the DMBOK that says your activities should go from planning to control to development to operations, but they don't always string this stuff together, especially on the deliverable side. So we've got a data governance recipe from a knowledge management point of view. How do we keep everybody doing it in the same way? And then I also spent some time looking at an alignment model. So how does data align with the business strategy? Because that's critical. And then the DMBOK, they have these two views here, but lots of times people don't clearly understand exactly what that means. And there's a lot to it where we're having to build both our digital strategy and our business strategy, and then how do we, from the business strategy, how do we get the organizational processes? And from the organizational processes, how do we automate? And then when we're automating, how do we keep the automation going in the right direction? So these were just some of the slides on how we pick up the maturity. I'm not sure, Debs, whether we've actually published the video from last week. I think we may have. But the whole drive is to get us from business efficiency that we spoke about, almost at a capability level, all the way up to business transformation. And we're trying to get to a point here of continuous strategy and planning, and the convergence between business and IT and data, or the digital side of it. So how do we keep on baking in the data into the business products? So this is the convergence that we spoke about in terms of making sure that as we select use cases that are part of the data strategy, then how do we ensure that the data strategy aligns to the digital strategy, which aligns to the business strategy? Because if you don't get this alignment right, then typically what you find is you build in a data strategy that maybe IT wants, or some SME feels is a good idea, and we don't always get the right strategic alignment. And that's what we refer to as vertical business alignment. But then there's also a horizontal alignment, right? So we want to align all of the domains, master data, data catalog, data quality, data classification, architecture, modeling. How do we keep them all going in the same direction to give us the outcomes that we're looking for? Now, what we've spoken about is building a use case register and a use case portfolio. We will touch on that a little bit more today. This was in a session that we had when we started, and we'll give you a little bit more details. But what I'm trying to do is build the guardrails. Make sure we've got enough guardrails to ensure that the program, the data management program, goes in the right direction, and everyone is contributing to the delivery of a use case, which is part of a data strategy. And I always ask people for the effectiveness of the data strategy. I don't know how many of you guys, just as a show of hand, how many people have a data strategy in their organizations? Anyone who's got a data strategy? Lebogang, fantastic. Who else? Donnie, have you got one? Remco, do you have a data strategy for your company?
Not for my company, but hopefully the company I work for, they might want to have a data strategy. I'm working on it.
Okay, fantastic. Now, what's interesting is those people that put their hands up for a data strategy, when last did you refer to the data strategy? When last did you read it and make sure that the decisions you're making are based on the data strategy? Debo, when last did you go through your data strategy?
So probably earlier on this year, what we do is annually we meet up and just look at what's in the data strategy versus what's in our plans for the year, and kind of try to link those up and see where the gaps are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what we're wanting to do is almost a case of we should be referring to our data strategy at least once a month, or even within the 6-week period, to ensure that we're getting the right guidance. So decisions made on what we're doing within the different knowledge areas, we should be referring to that strategy. And it was very interesting when we had this discussion with the business last week, and we asked them, you know, there's something on the data, something on the digital strategy that talks about dispute resolution. And the one lady said, I've never heard of it. She didn't know what they were talking about. And then you start realizing the implementation and the execution of these data strategies is where we're battling. Okay. All right. There's somebody on mute. Somebody. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's what we're doing. We want to try to ensure that we are actually moving in this direction a lot faster. Now, this is an overall diagram of how we use the governance and the foundational activities, but then when we're working with the data lifecycle, being architecture and modeling, operations, sharing, then we're doing it one use case at a time. And so as we choose our use cases, we go through building the data architecture, adding to the enterprise data model, and we'll take it almost by subject area or by element, and we'll build this big enterprise data model, ensure that we've got the right database management systems for the use case, look at the sharing requirements, and we just tackle it one use case at a time. Or when we have a sprint, then we'll actually go maybe several use cases at a time. And what made us realize that we've got this prioritization framework is when we walked through all of these regulations, we said, right, the questions they're asking here in the strategy and the problems to resolve, we find the same use cases in the data value realization knowledge area, and we find the same use cases in the business intelligence and analytics things. So all of these things, although separately in their own domains, they actually have to link to each other and deliver together. And then this is what we built, is we actually built a summary diagram of how we connect all of the different specifications, the domains, to achieve this data-driven state. So it took a long time to connect all the dots and then say, okay, these are the orders in which we're going to implement the different domains and the different specifications, and we're taking it one use case at a time. Okay, so they're not being done all in isolation. It's all done one use case at a time. Okay. All right, so that sort of goes through how we actually, the essential concepts of the data-driven use case. We then jumped into the data manager and how they enforce it. And now I'm going to hand over to JG to talk a little bit about when we change from being one big data strategy and then everyone must operate on it to a use case at a time data strategy and a data value-driven use case, how are the citizens required to change their thinking and to operate in a different fashion? All right.
Cool. Thanks, Howard. Thanks, everybody. So, as Howard mentioned, some of the learnings are going to be coming through straight from our the project that we're currently on. And so the phase that we find ourselves in this project is dealing with a data citizen in terms of the participants of the workshops that we hosted regarding the requirements that the business has. So the context of a data citizen is through the lens of actual parties within the organogram of the business. And in particular, those parties ranged from partner care, which you can think of as kind of your
customer management.
Customer management. Right, yeah. Then there was business development, finance, your typical kind of organogram. So I'm hoping that everybody can relate to the construct of a citizen within your context. And we're going to use some interesting examples. Sorry about that. Sorry, did I make it go the wrong way?
Yeah, I mean, it's using the wrong mouse.
Shucks, sorry.
Okay,
Perfect.
Okay. JG can only do something with his left hand. If he asks for the right hand, then.
So what's been really interesting is as we've gone through this compliance process, remember what Howard said earlier, is that compliance is a really good distiller of sequence and dependency. And that's pretty much what we've observed in this last week. Last week we spoke a little bit about the power of the data value realization process being the triggering a use case and creating a flow. You think of the DMBOK wheel. It's really inclusive and really all-encompassing. The problem is it's a wheel. You can start anywhere. And so one of the challenges that we needed to overcome was when guiding a client, where do we start? And so what was really useful through this process is the introduction of the data value realization framework. And as we were completing the compliance, what was interesting was most of the content that we had generated through the data value realization process was asked for in the compliance against the business intelligence and analytics portion of the compliance. Now, what's really interesting is if you have a look at the DMBOK, when it comes to data and analytics, is very clear about some of the analytical techniques and when you use which parts of analytic technique in order to answer the business question at hand. What was interesting through this process is how before you get to the analytics, it's leading with the value. And that's what Howard's talking about earlier, which is you must engage and then keep businesses' interests. Well, the easiest way to engage and keep businesses' interest is if you never lose sight of the value discussion and continually presenting any work, any engagement, any interaction relative to the value that the business is going to be achieving, as in the delivery of that use case, that the pillar of value. Next slide, please, Howard.
Yeah, so just an interesting question here is, we all know and we all get embarrassed when an exec or somebody asks us, what value are you delivering? I'm sure you've all felt awkward in that situation, in those conversations. Rob, I know, asked this question quite a lot in terms of where's the value to the business, to the execs, and are you understanding what you need to do? Now, if we take the DMBOK and we look for data value or the value of data, of course, at a high level, it's all about increasing the value of your assets. And then after that, we almost hear nothing about data value. Has anyone found the same thing with the DMBOK? That I think there's one mention of it. It's called data valuation in knowledge in data governance, right? It's not mentioned in BI, data warehousing and BI, and it's not mentioned in big data, right? Anyone notice that? So everyone's quiet at the moment. No one's answering. Donnie, Lebo, did you notice it when you were going through the DMBOK?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed it, Howard, and I think it's mostly because I'm trying to kickstart something which is new within our area. So a lot of it is trying to show what the value is going to be and all of that. So I've been looking around, and I think that's why even 2 days ago when we were in that session, I asked you the question. So for me, it's very important to be able to show to the business what the value of these different data management capabilities are.
And so I'd love to know, Lebo, when you started this journey of trying to show value, was there anywhere where you could go to help you define this and how to put it together? Or did you find?
It's very hard. It's very difficult. Yeah. So it's been going around in circles, finding a piece there, finding a piece here, but nothing. Yeah, not complete content that can help you kind of figure out a way to show it.
Right. And then it's also a case of saying, well, now that I've got to show value, how do I justify metadata and the value that metadata is bringing? How do I bring these two together?
You know, and it's so interesting, Lebo, that the dependency of delivering value is sometimes the metadata, the data cleansing, the curation, all of the domains that you need to traverse in order to realize the value. But it's so comforting to be able to answer the question, what value are you adding? Is I'm currently working on the metadata to realize the following use case.
Yeah.
And so when one is able to ground your action relative to the use case, and the use case valuation is not in question, it's such an empowering process.
And so I know we were going to talk about prioritization. Is there a screen later on about?
Yes,
okay, so we don't need to discuss it.
Okay, we're going to get them.
Okay, should I go?
Please go. So one of the challenges that we start to see is that vertical and horizontal alignment. So what this slide looks to depict is, remember how it showed you the vertical alignment with business and the horizontal alignment with respect to different data assets that find themselves at differing levels of maturity. And like almost iconically, we are starting to see the DVR process as that trigger that aligns these two triangles. And so between the next two slides, we're going to automatically show you how these triangles align. But what we're looking to do is land the DVR process as a trigger. Because most of the DVR actions are representing themselves in BI&A, in business analytics and insights, the DVR process is a catalyst and a trigger for alignment. And I guess that's been the biggest aha that we've had this week is we did all of this work in the DVR preparing against a DVR mandate, only for the compliance questions to be answered in business insights and analytics. And so what we're going to do, Howard, if you push the next slide, is when you see that alignment, this is such a powerful it's that catalytic change of aligning the business the vertical of the business to the horizontal of all of the different knowledge areas that the data process can leverage depending on the need of the data asset. And so remember, we're talking about the direction of a data asset, but also the direction of the data management process. And here we're seeing that that kind of alignment, though, bringing these two in a line, we've really found that DVR, that data value realization step, has been such a powerful way of kind of aligning and bringing these two together. And Howard, what's been really fascinating is when the business has been quite clear with their one metric that matters, and you can line up your DVR process on top of that one metric that matters, but all of a sudden, there's no, the discomfort feeling that you're adding value to the business goes away. You just know you are, because you're sitting delivering against the one metric that matters, figuring out why it's hard and how you're curating it, knowing that you've just been through the data value realization trigger, and you sit here and go, we're aligned. We've got vertical and horizontal alignment, and we call it here on the slide. It's that pragmatic North Star. Remember, when one rolls up your one metric that matters from your from your project into your program, into your division, into your operational entity, when that thing bubbles all the way up, you get your North Star of the business. And so we keep needing to remind ourselves is that when somebody bumps into us in the corridor and asks in Arabic, what value are you adding? We've got to be really succinct, really tidy, and Lebohang, we found this to be really a useful process. It would encourage your consideration of aligning the DVR process to the one metrics that matters when it comes down to never being in doubt as to where your value is.
Now, what we had was we interviewed a lady that's doing really well. She's looking after the partners, and when we spoke to her, she's aggregating data from all over the place. Whatever channel they can get, they're bringing the data together, and they're running ahead with some really interesting tonality and sentiment to be able to understand how their partners are interacting. But when you try to link that to what's happening in the product development and the business development, there's not always the link, and it's not clearly understood. And when they try to say, well, we're all aiming for this, then we don't find that statement coming clearly through as that's what we're trying to contribute to, and that's what we're trying to work on. So that's been our journey of trying to align and get this sorted out. From the business strategy, they've got a fantastic digital strategy. It is amazing in terms of what they're going to achieve. But then we say, well, are we aligned to this? Or are we doing stuff that's been recognized? And so we have to keep asking those questions. Where are we in this alignment?
So this has been I'd like to just take a moment and follow the flow. And so what we're looking at here is the desired future state of a data-driven business. And in that green circle, it's the statements of your stakeholders. And in this case, I'd like to put the word exec in there. But even the stakeholders of people managing the business units it's just so much easier to hit our goals. And I can see the trend coming and making the decisions based on fact. So that's a nice galvanizing picture. And what we're seeing here is this desire to get a higher level of alignment in the business in terms of the percentage of companies where there's just strong agreement that the decisions that matter get made promptly and well. So when you pose that question, do the decisions that matter get made promptly and well? The answers to that are kind of ranking the companies. And what this diagram on the right says is top performers is just such a high level of agreement of what are the decisions and why do they matter, because they're starting to align to a really kind of galvanizing set of metrics, that one metrics that matter, and then you plug all of your initiatives against that, and then all of a sudden you get a massive amount of commitment to cleaning the data such that there's less ambiguity, more alignment, and better accuracy of your one metrics that matters. So all of a sudden, business is now encouraging you to spend money on your metadata alignment, on your data curation, on the data repository. So it's almost like the business then demands the accuracy, and they're telling you where to spend money. So really, really encouraging. Next slide. So the data value driven way runs through the following steps, and I'm not be available to read. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but it really does just say start with your value discipline. And in this case, an example of the value discipline, next slide please, is sorry, I'm going to go to the next slide. The value discipline is the middle column, and those are the three options: operational excellence, partnership, partner leadership, and client intimacy. And you'll see that there's different aspirational goals for each of those. But what you're looking at here is the sequence of steps that if you start on the left and work your way to the right, this is the process that we are leading the data citizen through in order to get in order to create a like a confidence in their business decision-making approach. Like almost it becomes habitual rather than every time I'm faced with a challenge, I'm not sure which way to progress. And so in the environment at the moment, in the environment that we're operating in the moment, is the business identity has been quite well defined, quite clear. The business value discipline is operational excellence, and we now are looking to guide the analytics from through the business operating model, which you can see on the slide is the middle, the third column, through the business metric layer, and you can see we really are spending time on the one metric that matters, and then being able to launch through into the business question environment. So that progression has been so much easier as a result of being able to ground it with respect to the data value realization trigger on top of the one metric that matters.
Yeah.
Anything else here, Howard?
Yeah. So just to ask and ask the people in the audience to understand that when you have these questions framed and you have the metric that matters, then basically what should be doing, what the analytics need to be doing is to be answering, why did this one metric that matter go south? So why did we perform bad? So what happened? First of all, tell me what happened, and then explain why it happened. So it becomes pretty simple of saying, well, we did worse than we budgeted, we did better than we budgeted. Well, if we did better, then why did it happen? And what can we do to make it happen again? And then where will we land up, and what should I do? So these things provide almost a snowball of discussions and analysis of what's going on. Rob, I see your hands up.
That's very clever, Howard. Just looking at where the intent of this project is to look at the business efficiency. Why would you involve process modeling in what you're doing right now, or is it just completely? How would that kind of fit? Because that's typically the old world in terms of what's been used to actually identify process bottlenecks and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so you're right in terms of at a business efficiency level, then you'd look at, well, how do I do that ABC costing at a business process level? And then also your business efficiency in terms of saying, well, is the process delivering the right result? And then the business transformation level, those are the sort of three levels. Now, at this stage, when the business has already been operating, they have people within the business strategy department that are already focusing on, can they optimize their processes to be better? And so that's certainly been an area that we looked at. And one of the use cases that we were asked to look at was sharing of data between internal people, so from sharing between different departments, and from external sharing. and they are saying that the amount of time that it takes to deliver this is very ineffective, chews up a lot of resources, and they want to deal with that sort of thing. Now, that use case gets classified as a cost reduction use case, if that makes sense. So they raise all these requirements that we're battling here, here, and here, and then we say, okay, there's a cost reduction use case. That's one of the things. And then we'd start saying, well, prioritize all these use cases according to the other use cases. And if it gets to the top, then we'll deal with it. And we'll have to look at implementation feasibility there as well. Does that answer your question, Rob?
Thank you. Yes, good stuff, this, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Is any more? Okay, great. So this is basically a playbook that we take business people through in terms of getting to the point where they make decisions promptly and well. That's what it's all about. So from here.
Yeah, so this was just quite interesting, guiding the client to, or this is something that the business should almost reveal or be very clear on. And what was interesting here is the trade-off, the aspirational trade-off on the right-hand side. You can see for the legend, 3 axes. It's almost like when you first ask the business this question, they want multiple axes. They want several, and you almost need to convince you never convince them, but you continue to hone your questioning until you find the one. And so, inventory turns, service, or cost. And what was interesting here is what's in brackets is it's the trade-off. Is if it's customer intimacy, the extra mile has an extra cost and a premium. And so when one looks at each of these dimensions, you can start to see how the value dimension comes in, and figuring out, what is biased, what is traded. And as a data practitioner, even though the business should be able to articulate this, it would be so powerful to always have this in the back of your mind. Even if consulting into a company and they're not sure, it's really helpful for you to have an idea in terms of what it could be. So I just put it up here because it was so simplifying. It simplified the approach to such a high degree when one launches into shared value based on knowing which dimension they're on.
So just to give some examples to you guys, probably Remco, the one that you guys look at is product leadership, where your product from a modeling point of view and things like that, you want to almost have the best product, and for people to recognize your leadership at a product level. It's not to say that you don't look after the customer intimacy, but it's always about pushing the product to the next level. Am I correct in that, Remco?
Yeah, I think you're correct on that one. I'm just constantly trying to shift into my daily practice and my data modeling push and to what you're telling. But yeah, absolutely, 100% with you, Howard.
Right.
And it's all about communication, right?
Yes. And it's all about everybody understanding what's important to them.
Yep.
Okay, so if it's all about product leadership, then what happens is that you develop a culture of people that are the best in data modeling and working with data. Those are the employees that really contribute. If somebody comes in and they just love the customer and they ignore the product, then they start having a challenge where the friction starts to develop. Or if they're in operational excellence and they just want to just get better and better at doing one process, then there's challenges as well. Now, level, if we apply this to you, then it's probably customer intimacy, where you're focusing on, and that may be your key focus. I'm not sure if that's correct on your side, Level.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you're not always looking for the best product, the best checking account, or the best whatever. Yes, you keep up, but at a lot of the times you're trying to make that customer feel like you've heard them, you're delivering features for them, and you're supporting all their requirements. So things like customer journey maps are really important to you. But then when it comes to governmental organizations, 99% of the time, the government organization is there to be operational excellence, making sure their citizens are being served as quickly as possible. You don't have any queues outside the passport or home affairs, and you're just getting things done as efficiently as possible. Okay.
So I'm not going to touch on this. Yeah, please, thank you. And again, so the context of the way we've walked through this playbook, it must be seen within the context of the data citizen. And what we are highlighting here, and it's an observation just looking at the user's response to us, is why are we not just talking about whether we're going to use a statistical approach, or are we going to use a kind of a decision, what decision support mechanism are we going to use? Why are we starting so far up the value chain before we start talking about the analytical techniques? And so it shows us that the natural tendency is to dive into how we're going to execute on the analytics before we've firmly grounded the metric that we want to illuminate. So I don't know whether the word illuminate's right, but it's been quite interesting how the natural response is, when are we going to, and also particularly, some of the people that we're working with are doing courses like
Python and R.
So they're desperately looking for, when am I going to deploy these tools that I've been learning and that I understand to be so valuable? And why are you starting me so far up? And it's been interesting to just coach, lead, and guide, so that when we do get to the tools, we are not looping back to just to validate value. We've got that landed, and so the sequence from left to right of these different stages in this playbook have been really empowering to make sure that we walk the business in a way where there's just no doubt in terms of what they agree. Thanks, Alan. So now we get on to the business decision-making approach. So here we're now at the heart of what the DMBOK would consider to be BI and analytics, as well as the compliance.
Yeah.
But what's been interesting through this case study that we've been doing with this, the national regulator, is they've included value, all of the DVR, the data value realization process, before you get to the step. So empowering. Now it's a case of cool. Now what are our options? And so here we now enter into considering the type of business questions that are being asked and the kind of data that is available to answer the questions. And now immediately we go into the kind of 2x2 matrices that you would expect through the Cynefins or the knowns and unknowns. And we now start to enter into the kind of how I'm missing the collection now, all these business questions, we need to land them. The method is the analytical method. And so we now lead with the question, but the beauty is it's not a speculation, it's a business question.
Yeah.
And so I guess what we're saying to the audience today, and our experience in this last week, is as a result of being quite particularly we've been particular about the sequence that we've walked. We are now sitting with business questions in our Cynefin landscape that aren't speculates about potential value. They are clear business questions about articulating value. And so it's a really empowering place to be, because we can stay in our analysis realm until we can take each of the questions, interrogate it with respect to, is the question known and the data available, and how does that work? So we can now I think we're good with this slide. And we can now, yeah, I think we'll cover that again. Sorry, these all I'm just aware of time. I just want to get on to the last slide. Yeah, next one. And this is now where we're now encouraging the methodology to be used to be the ODA methodology in terms of the incremental iteration of observe, orientate, decide, and act, and in particular, making sure that we've taken each of the business questions that we're looking to ask and consider, and land it within and address it with an appropriate analytical technique. Maybe how this is a good time, just with the time remaining, to just there could be people on the call that are just going, there are different kinds of questions that lend themselves to different kinds of analytical techniques. The next slide shows that well, I think. And maybe that would be a good way just to wrap it up, because that's pretty much where we've got to. This one here, yeah.
Okay, so of course there are different types of decisions. Sorry, I saw a question come up. I'm not sure if there was a question from there. I'm not looking at the chat box, which I'm looking at now. Hello, hi, greetings. Okay, so there are multiple types of decisions. Your strategic decisions, in terms of who are we, where are we going, and these are quite complex to sort out, and they're not very hard, and there's no well-defined answer. Okay, so if you were to go to a company, for example, Remco, saying, well, who are we and where are we heading? He can't go to an expert and say, well, please, can you answer this question for us, right? That's not going to work. It's all about you exploring where you're heading and where you're going to. And that determines the type of analytics that you do. And can you see here, it's referred to as explorative analytics. And so the impact on answering these questions is really high. Is there any cause and effect? So could you just run a predictive algorithm on this and say, well, this is where we're going? The answer is probably not. So strategic thinking is very, very much an explorative approach. So in doing that, we go probe, try, is this the right way to go? Do customers really like this value proposition? Are they responding? No, they don't really like it. So let's go in another way. We probe somewhere else. And we'll look at that in terms of maybe our data modeling technique. We're constantly trying to get feedback in terms of what is it that they are looking for and how do we solve their problems. Okay, of course, with more and more training and more discussions, you work out what it is. And then we go to the next level of decisions, how to manage performance to achieve the strategy. And this is the typical questions of what resources are needed for us to, how many trainers do we need, how many consultants, how many, whatever it is, how many of these people do we need? And that is not as complex as the previous one, and it's more of what we Kneffen refers to as a complicated mode. And you'll see, you may be able to see a slide diagram over here where it's complicated. The actual approach is complicated. Now, you could, in a lot of times, you could go to an expert and they typically have an answer for you, and you would use the type of analytics that you're going to be using here is confirmatory analytics. So you'd find some way of predicting the level of resources that you need, and then you would go and try to confirm that. Okay, the predictive model, it says that we need to grow in this direction, or this is where we're headed. And then you say, well, let's please try to confirm that, and let's our testing be appropriate for a prediction type of algorithm. Okay, so have you noticed just the words that I'm using? It's already starting to dictate the type of AI algorithm that you want to use. And when you in all the very simple one, you're in a scenario here where you know the outcome and you can almost program this in an if then else statement. If this happens, if this is the cause, we know what the outcome is going to be. And then we can work our way through that. And this is a great area for digital decisioning, or RPA, robotic procedure automation. People understand the flow, they understand where it is, and it's a relatively simple environment. But then you get other areas that are chaos areas, this instinctive one. And the best thing is to say, guys, you don't have data to answer these questions, so use the gut. Use an understanding of where you should be going, and don't ignore that power of not thinking. Because if you think too much in these type of scenarios, you're not really going to get anywhere, and the data is not going to be helpful. Now, you don't really know what the impact is going to be. We had scenarios like that in our own business when we were training face-to-face training, and then all of a sudden everyone was locked down. A lot of the bank people said we just can't come on the training, and we had to quickly jump into a different learning management approach. And so we went online and we tried to work out how it was going along the journey. So you can apply this thinking and approach to all sorts of different types of decisions. So I'm hoping you're starting to see here that it's not just for specific decisions. And then when you can categorize your decision, you can also categorize the type of analytical methods you use, the type of information and the type of data that you need to collect to be able to answer it. And then, of course, the cause and effect. So if you're in an operational area, the cause and effect is going to be well defined. If you're in a strategic area, you don't actually understand what the cause and effect may be, and that correlation is not there. So always looking for the causation doesn't work within a strategic type of environment. Is there anything else?
Well, maybe just the fact that what's been really powerful through this process is not all business questions are handled in the same way.
Yeah.
So categorizing the type of questions that are coming at you has been quite empowering through the business, for the business to figure out, oh, okay, you know, if you classify questions in that particular way, well, that, you know, here I have a couple more of that type. And so the valuation process really demands the business questions to be succinct and crisp. And what this then does is it allows them to be categorized and to use the right tools for the right approach. Why this has been so powerful, and I think it'll be maybe the last point, is we are running within the context of a really ambitious digital strategy, transformational strategy. And there is a lot of desire to leverage data and thereby, you know, one of it's even specifically articulated as, you know, use an AI product.
Yeah.
Well, use an AI product in accordance with a business question that demands and deserves it. You don't just bring a tool to a business question where it's inappropriate. And so categorizing the types of questions and the constructs of whether the inputs are known or the outputs are known, it's been a really powerful mechanism to just categorize and manage the user's expectation is that you're not going to be using the same tools for all of them. And what you can encourage the business to do is to get going with some of the tools that are easier, deliver value with those, and not feel inadequate that they didn't bring a statistical algorithm to a problem that was actually just looking for a straight descriptive answer.
Okay.
And so it's empowering again. And so I thought that for me is just, you know, as we said, data citizens. So just wrapping up today's slide deck is, I asked you just to remember that we were in the context of a data citizen. We saw that we bring in value much earlier than most of the bodies of knowledge require. Because we bring that in earlier, it clears up the questions. They get quite crisp.
Yeah.
They get aligned to metrics that matter. And then when one gets to the analytical techniques, it's easier to categorize. And so I think those are our key learnings this last week, and we look forward to sharing, you know, what are we doing next week, Howard?
Professional.
Oh, okay.
So that would actually be like a data quality person or a metadata specialist or whatever it is. How do we get them to all play a role in helping us deliver the use case and get the sprint going? All right. Thanks, JG. Thanks for that feedback. That sort of brings it to the end of the presentation, and we'd love to just hear your feedback in terms of do you find that this is a valuable path that you can follow, or what we call, this is the data value driven way? Is it something that will help you structure your thinking, help you define the method, and help you move along the process of implementing your strategy?
I'm happy to kick off, Howard, on this round. I think it's great work. It's good to have those really clear way of, okay, what kind of question we have, and to categorize it into, okay, it's a strategic question, so this is what we want to have, this kind of analysis we want to do. So making that categorization and going from one to the other, also in my experience on data modeling, it's really helpful to really categorize and make small steps, and don't try to do everything at once. I think that really is helpful. So I could definitely see this work.
And what we found, and it's amazing, Remco, is we choosing the use case name is got to be one of the hardest things and the most powerful things at the same time. So I think, what was the use case that the first use case on revenue generation
was to give a perspective of the industry classification.
Yeah, industry classification. And what we noticed is, so we had to basically present to anybody who's a partner or someone who's doing research on whether they should go and invest in certain profiles, whatever it is they wanted to know, what the industry sector was by area, what the density was of the population. So these are very important questions that they need to answer. But as you go along, it's very quick to slide something in of, oh, but let's do this. And you ask yourself the question, but what has that got to do with giving them the answer that they need? And then it doesn't become the question is not there.
Dilutes, actually, rather than adds value.
So that whole thing of everybody being aligned to that use case and threading through everything from doing data quality. So how do I prioritize my critical data elements? Okay, this is the way we do it, and it's related to making that decision. What inputs are there for the decision? Okay, those are critical data elements. Even the subject areas and the data model, what's appropriate for this area right now? And we don't have to go and do everything, we just have to get this area sorted out. Now, in using that use case, of course, the architects and that still have to think of the bigger picture and the data estate, but it's about saying we're focusing here for now, and so we go along the journey, and we're not always debating, is it right or wrong, or what about this, or what about that? No, that's what the use case was defined. That's what we have to deliver. We can always come back with another use case to add more information, knowledge, and wisdom, but this one has to deliver this area over here.
And I think that's cool. And the use case shouldn't be too big, because then you're going to put everything in it, and it should be very clear.
Yes.
And you need for everybody to understand what we mean with the use case, and let's stick to the use case. And if there's something else coming which is important, indeed, it's a new use case. So next step.
Yes.
You know, Remco, it's really interesting. Howard is very gracious when he says, you know, we needed to simplify. The complexity came in because I added it, because I thought it would be something that would be, because we can and we should, and you know, it's so amazing, and we could give all of this color.
Yeah.
That comes in the next iteration of the use case.
Yeah.
Don't dilute it. And here, as a data professional, we're thinking that we're bringing value and adding value, but actually we run the risk of diluting the use case. And so that was the massive learning for me, was don't dilute the use case, just get it out fast. And if you want to add, no problem, but add on the next iteration.
I always tell people that my role is to simplify, and because people are so very quick in making stuff very, very complicating, and then said, yeah, but it doesn't work, or it's too complex to it. And okay, let's do a couple of steps back. Let's simplify first, and then go from there. But that's the hard work, right? Simplifying, and the fun part.
Yeah, and it's actually, I mean, I'm sure, Remco, you're well aware of this, especially when you get into dimensional modeling and you start adding those questions. I want to see the growth in by industry sector, by area, and as soon as you add another by, so the complexity scales. And that's the value of keeping that use case tight and defining it well up front, and then also being able to measure, well, what value do I get out of this? Has it got enough value? And as soon as the business rank it and say, this is the one we're going with, then that's the one that keeps you in the guardrails.
Yeah, it's also, by the way, when they go to the process of getting to dimensional model, first do the ensemble logical modeling process in first up, because it makes your life easier getting the data out in also in those questions, also preventing all the adding of bias in your dimensional model.
Fantastic. Thank you, Remco.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. All right, Rob Jackson, I see you've got your comment is the process approach is invaluable as a regular interaction with the sponsor and business in general. And that's certainly something that we've seen as constantly going back to them and confirming all sorts of things. For example, their prioritization. We almost have a roadblock and a road check to say, okay, you've told us about all these things that you want to achieve. Now, what's the value coming back to you? And you have the say. We can adjust our technical feasibility. So we had to do a maturity assessment on what the level of competency and capability was in BI, data quality, and all these sort of things. And we said, okay, yeah, you've got a pretty low score, so we've got a high implementation challenge. But is this still valuable, and how does it rate? And they get the ones to sign off the final use case prioritization. So that constant going back and allowing them to decide where our direction is was also a very valuable approach. Rob, is that sort of answering your question or your comment? And I think you had another question on.
It wasn't a question.
Rob.
It wasn't a question.
Oh, okay.
First one. It was.
I think the second one is, has the Saudi folks adopted the Agile process?
That's the question.
Yes. Sorry, I think I'm interrupting you, Rob.
The first one wasn't a question. The second one is.
Okay. So the answer to the second question, have they adopted the Agile? Yes, they have. And they were very comfortable in the sprints and the sprint train and the Agile approach. So they didn't find the use case something weird about it. And if we look to their digital strategy, there were use cases all over it, and they spoke about in detail in terms of how to achieve these use cases on their own and setting up certain trains to achieve it.
Cool, thank you.
So Rob, with respect to how the Saudis took the Agile process as how it's said, but another observation was as the team executing against a use case, and we needed to actually go through the process of valuing the data assets that make up the use case. When we had completed one of those processes for one of the use case, I remember looking at you and going, how would you ever do that if you didn't limit the scope to a use case? You couldn't value it unless you were actually use case driven, because it just gets too big. There's like, you don't have the guardrails for valuation. So this doing it in iterative use cases is a key part of being able to value the data.
And sometimes people start with evaluation at the asset level, and they don't really understand, well, how is this asset going to be used? So then the number could be whatever it is, in terms of, well, I've got to go and find all the potential uses of this data asset and then quantify and value each one in terms of the value it brings to the business, which is not that easy. All right. Any other question? Patrick, anything from you? I know that you're going to be presenting on big data and analytics on Monday, so I was wondering how this resonates with you.
No, it's been helpful. It's been helpful. And at the same time, it helped reiterate some of the frustrations I have now. I work in a predominantly consulting space, so there are a lot of quick wins I see. So this type of thinking, it's not really there. The issue of metadata, data cataloging, and how that speaks to data accuracy, which is a bit of the frustration I hope to share, hopefully next week when we have our discussion.
Right. And we're also having to deliver a data catalog framework. And one of the nice things that we've got, they ask you, what is your prioritization? Which data assets should you look at first? And of course, we're saying, well, it's the prioritization on the business use case that determines what data assets we catalog. And you're only cataloging the assets that are part of the use case, which is fantastic from a point of view that you don't have to go and search for every single data asset in the building. And in some cases, you may be adding data liabilities rather than data assets. All right. Fire hose almost manageable. Okay. Any other questions? Connie, anything from your side? You. Excellent. Guys, thank you. Yes, sorry, Lebo.
Yeah, no, it's Levo. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I think this was really valuable. And for me, it's that continuous evaluation. It's that linking our direction of the data asset and of the data management to the value, because sometimes from a governance perspective, it just seems you're doing it for doing it, those data maturity assessments and so on. And for the business, they see it as just governance. But when we link it to the value of the data and start to show them how it then is valuable for them, I think it will be really helpful. And for me personally, also around the aligning the DVR to a metric that matters. I think that's going to be key for me in the next couple of weeks in bringing that and showing that value in the pilot that I'm running. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
And Lebo, just a point you brought in is, for example, when we had these use cases, we decided on the use cases. The use cases, for example, the one use case was about sharing data. And we went into the data integration and sharing domain, and we said, how good are we at that? And the answer was not very good. And so we raised or we increased our implementation challenges. So all of a sudden, people understood why we were doing the maturity assessment. It wasn't because we wanted to generate more money and bring a whole lot of people, consultants in to help improve integration. No, it was to deal with that use case. And the scope of your data management maturity assessment was based on the use case. It's not based on, let's just apply the DMBOK to everything.
Yes,
It's now selected. It's a selective maturity assessment.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Right. Donnie, anything from your side? I know you've done a lot of this.
Yes, I can also agree with Patrick, primarily in the consulting space with the customer. You know, there's quite some challenges on our side at the moment, as the data management office side has changed a lot over the last 3 years about, and so getting alignment, is a bit challenging at the moment, and the way that the business is trying to, I can almost say, be too dynamic at the moment, and losing sight of the quality issues, especially around master data management in our space. So that's, we faced with quite a lot of challenges to get that standard and management set up again there.
Nice. Yeah, so again, we had a scenario. One of the use cases demanded a master data of a regional location master data. And when we went to have a look at what they were doing, we found one area that was very advanced with the whole GIS mapping and elements like that. So that was fantastic to see that. And then all of a sudden I said, well, you know, we're capable of delivering this thing. We've got that capability. We've got a good authoritative source. So that was a good tick to say it's a helpful skill that we have in the organization. So it's this driven by use cases to do what it is that's important, make sure that we bring in all the elements that challenge the feasibility of delivering on the use case, and business are aware of it. They're aware of all of the problems that we have to fix before we can go forward.
Yep.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Have a wonderful evening. And we'll chat next. I think on Tuesday, we're actually going to have one from Christine, and that's going to be dealing with the culture of getting people to move from very siloed ways of working, of doing data management, to a thread or a DVR-driven way. We're going to talk about the challenges that we face from a cultural point of view of getting the DBA to realize he's got to do something now that brings value, and he can't just sit there and look at the way the data is growing or going anywhere. So we're now having to deal with the cultural issues as well and the change management. So that's what Christine will be sharing on Tuesday of next week. So I hope to see you again then. And of course for Patrick's presenting on Monday. All right.
Thanks, everyone. It was very beneficial. Looking forward to next week, Monday.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.